Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a subject that, well, it basically reshaped the world overnight. Nuclear weapons.
It's a massive topic, hard to overstate the impact.
Absolutely. And it's full of contradictions, isn't it? These incredibly destructive tools that some argue actually kept a kind of peace.
That's the core paradox, yeah. Unbelievable destructive power used, supposedly, to prevent war.
So we're not just skimming the surface here. We want to do a really comprehensive, critical look. Think of it as unpacking these unparalleled instruments of power.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Let's go right back from the theory, the science, the history, proliferation, the arguments for and against.
The ethics, too. Can't forget that.
Definitely the ethics, and then how the world has tried to manage them, the cooperation, the treaties, and what the future might hold. Basically, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what's next.
A tall order, but essential.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really get a handle on this, we need to go back to the beginning. And surprisingly, maybe, it didn't start with bombs in mind.
Not directly, no. It started with pure science, basic curiosity about the world.
Like late 19th century, Röntgen X-rays, Becquerel finding radioactivity.
Exactly. And Marie and Pierre Curie identifying polonium and radium in 1898. They were revealing this hidden energy within atoms, but nobody was really thinking about weapons yet.
But then came Leo Szilard. He made a huge leap, didn't he?
A massive leap. In 1933, he came up with the idea of a neutron chain reaction releasing energy.
And he immediately thought, bombs.
He explicitly considered it, more than 6 years before fission was actually discovered experimentally. It's kind of mind-blowing.
He even patented it.
Filed a patent in 1934, yeah. For neutron-induced chain reactions, explosions, critical mass, the foresight is just remarkable.
Wow.
And that really highlights something crucial. The dual-use nature was there from the very, very beginning. Szilard saw both sides.
Then the science caught up.
Right. December 1938, Otto Hahn gets the experimental result.
Right.
Lisa Meitner and Otto Frisch figure out what it means, they call it fission, and calculate this enormous energy release, 200 megaelectron volts.
And Oppenheimer.
Almost instantly. January 1939, he sees Hahn's results and realizes, okay, those extra neutrons mean a bomb is actually possible.
So it went from theory to potential weapon incredibly fast.
Blindingly fast, especially given the context.
Which was World War II heating up, and the fear that Nazi Germany might get there first.
Exactly. That fear propelled the U.S. into action, the Manhattan Project. Highly secret, incredibly ambitious.
Just how ambitious are we talking?
Scale-wise, around $2 billion in 1940s money. That was a huge slice of the entire U.S. war spending.
Right.
It shows the urgency they felt.
And the people involved. Oppenheimer, obviously.
Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb, brought in to run the lab in '42. Brilliant physicist, crucial for understanding the fast neutrons needed.
And Szilard again. He wasn't just theory, right?
No, he was deeply involved. He drafted the famous Einstein letter to Roosevelt in August '39, warning about the possibility and urging U.S. action. That really kicked things off.
Then Fermi.
Enrico Fermi. He teamed up with Szilard, and together they achieved the first controlled, self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. Chicago Pile 1, December 2nd, 1942.
So that proved it could be done. Power and weapons.
Unequivocally, the genie was out of the bottle, scientifically speaking.
Thinking about those scientists. They must have been wrestling with this, right? Creating something so powerful.
Oh, absolutely. It was a profound ethical tightrope. The fear of the Nazis getting it first was immense, a powerful driver.
But were there doubts? Pushback?
There were. Szilard, later on, even circulated a petition asking for a demonstration of the bomb first, not using it on a city without warning. It was rejected. Truman himself faced some internal dissent.
And after the war?
You see a real shift. Figures like Szilard, Einstein, they became powerful advocates for nuclear control. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto in '55 is a key example. A deep sense of responsibility clearly emerged once the immediate threat was gone. They knew what they'd unleashed.
Which brings us to the Trinity test, the moment it became real.
July 16, 1945. 5:30 in the morning, New Mexico desert. They detonated the gadget, a plutonium implosion bomb, on a 100-foot tower.
Oppenheimer called it Trinity.
He did. The yield was about 18.6 kilotons. Just vaporized the tower, turned the sand and asphalt into that greenish glass trinitite.
People saw it from miles away.
Hundreds of miles. The flash, the sound. It was the dawn of the atomic age, no question.
And then, just weeks later, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the only times these weapons have been used in war.
August 6, 1945. Little boy, a uranium gun-type bomb over Hiroshima. About 15 kilotons. Simpler design.
In Nagasaki.
3 days later, August 9th. Fat Man, a plutonium implosion type like Trinity. around 21 kilotons.
It's the devastation.
Yeah.
The numbers are hard to comprehend.
Between 150,000 and 246,000 people killed, most of them civilians, many dying months later from radiation. Japan surrendered on August 15th.
And the debate over whether it was necessary or justified, it still rages.
It absolutely does. Supporters say it ended the war quickly, saved potentially millions of lives compared to an invasion of Japan.
Critics.
Critics argue it was inhumane, a war crime targeting civilians.
Yeah.
That Japan might have surrendered soon anyway. But what's undeniable is the nature of the destruction.
Indiscriminate.
Completely. The scale, the suffering, the long-term radiation effects. It was a unique kind of catastrophe. It really galvanized the anti-nuclear movement and became the bedrock for arguing against these weapons on humanitarian, moral, and legal grounds. That phrase, a bottomless wound in the living conscience of the race, really captures it.
Okay, let's dig into the science a bit more. Fission versus fusion. Atomic bombs first. How do they work again?
Right, fission bombs. Think of it like breaking something big apart. They get their power from splitting heavy atomic nuclei, usually uranium-235 or plutonium.
How does the splitting happen?
A neutron hits a heavy nucleus, it becomes unstable, and splits into smaller pieces. Crucially, this split releases more neutrons, plus a huge amount of energy, that binding energy, holding the nucleus together.
And those new neutrons hit other nuclei.
Exactly. If you have enough of the right material packed together, what's called critical mass, those new neutrons cause more splits, which release more neutrons, and boom, you get a runaway chain reaction, an atomic explosion.
Little boy was uranium, fat man was plutonium.
Correct. Different materials, slightly different bomb designs, but both based on that fission principle.
You mentioned the energy density earlier. Can you give us a sense of that?
It's pretty staggering. A single uranium fuel pellet, maybe the size of an egg, holds the energy equivalent of about 88 tons of coal.
Wow.
And that inherent energy density is why controlling the materials, the highly enriched uranium or plutonium, became the absolute key focus for non-proliferation. Making the bomb is hard, sure, but getting the fissile material, that's the really difficult, expensive part, and the choke point for international control efforts.
Okay, so that's fission, splitting atoms. Then came thermonuclear weapons, H-bombs, a whole different level.
A massive leap, yeah. Orders of magnitude more powerful. These don't split heavy atoms. They fuse light ones together.
Like hydrogen isotopes, like the sun.
Exactly like the sun, taking very light nuclei like isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium, and smashing them together under extreme heat and pressure so they combine into a heavier nucleus, like helium. This fusion process releases even more energy per unit of mass than fission.
Where did the idea come from?
It was actually discussed during the Manhattan Project. Edward Teller, in particular, was very interested. But the big challenge was how to create the intense conditions needed for fusion.
How'd they solve that?
The breakthrough was the Teller-Ulam design. Basically, using the radiation from an initial fission explosion, the primary stage, to compress and heat the fusion fuel in a secondary stage before the blast wave tears it apart.
So you use an A-bomb to trigger an H-bomb?
Essentially, yes. The fission primary creates the X-rays, and heat needed to ignite the fusion secondary. It's a two-stage process.
And the first H-bomb test?
The U.S. test Ivy Mike, November 1st, 1952, it yielded 10.4 megatons. That's about 500 times more powerful than the Nagasaki bomb. A truly terrifying jump.
And there are bigger ones.
Oh, yes. The Castle Bravo test, March 1st, 1954, it was designed for maybe 6 megatons, but it went off at nearly 17 megatons. It caused unexpected radioactive fallout, contaminating a Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon No. 5, and residents of nearby atolls. A real disaster that highlighted the uncontrollable power.
So what does this all mean, this incredible jump in destructive power? What did it do strategically?
It completely changed the game. Suddenly, you needed far fewer weapons to threaten total annihilation. You entered the era of overkill, where both sides had enough power to destroy the other many times over.
Which makes war even more unthinkable.
Exactly. It paradoxically reinforced the idea that these weapons were fundamentally unusable in any rational conflict. It solidified the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, AMA.
The idea that any nuclear attack would inevitably lead to the attacker's own destruction, so no one would start one.
Precisely. It's a terrifying logic, built on the promise of total annihilation. But, arguably, it did contribute to a kind of stability during the Cold War, preventing direct, large-scale conflict between the superpowers because the risks were just too high.
A stability based on terror. So who got these weapons? Who's in the nuclear club?
Right, the acquisition race started almost immediately. The NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, recognizes 5 official nuclear weapon states.
The U.S., first in 1945?
Then the Soviet Union, now Russia, in
Yeah.
1949, the UK in 1952, France in 1960, and China in 1964.
And these 5 are also the permanent members of the UN Security Council.
Correct, and they're the only ones confirmed to have thermonuclear weapons, the H-bombs.
But the club didn't stop there, did it? Despite the NPT trying to limit the spread.
No, several other countries developed nuclear weapons outside that framework. India tested its first device in 1974.
Which prompted Pakistan.
It certainly accelerated Pakistan's program. They both conducted tit-for-tat tests publicly in May 1998. Neither India nor Pakistan ever signed the NPT.
In Israel.
Israel maintains a policy of ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying, but it's universally believed they have a nuclear arsenal, maybe around 90 warheads. They also never signed the NPT.
Then there's North Korea.
North Korea actually joined the NPT in 1983, but then withdrew in 2003. They conducted their first nuclear test in 2006 and have done several since, developing more advanced weapons.
So what's the effect of more countries getting the bomb, this horizontal proliferation?
It makes the world significantly more dangerous, frankly. It increases the number of actors who could potentially use these weapons, introduces new regional flashpoints like the India-Pakistan border, which is a constant worry, and it definitely undermines the credibility of the NPT and the whole non-proliferation effort.
Creates new arms races.
Yes, the regional arms races and security dilemmas where one country's actions make its neighbors feel less secure, prompting them to react. It's a destabilizing cycle.
What do the arsenals look like today, numbers-wise?
As of early 2024, the estimates are around 13,000 total nuclear weapons globally.
Still that many.
Still that many, though down significantly from the Cold War peak. Of those, maybe 3,800 are considered operational, deployed with military forces.
Then ready to go.
Around 2,000 are kept on high alert status, meaning they can be launched very quickly, within minutes.
Who has the most?
The vast majority, over 90%, still belong to the US and Russia. Though China's arsenal is growing rapidly, estimates suggest maybe 600 now, potentially hitting 1,000 by 2030.
That's a lot of firepower. And beyond just having them, there's the history of testing them?
A long and, frankly, damaging history. Since 1945, at least 8 countries have conducted over 2,000 nuclear test explosions.
2,000? Where were these tests?
They happened in all environments initially. About 520 were atmospheric tests in the air, underwater, in space, releasing huge amounts of radioactive fallout.
That sounds bad.
It was terrible for the environment and health. After the partial test ban treaty in '63 largely stopped those, most tests went underground. Around 1,350 underground tests from the late 50s to the 90s.
Who tested the most?
The U.S. conducted the most, over 1,030. The Soviet Union, Russia did 715. Then France, 210, UK 45, China 45, India 3, Pakistan 2, and North Korea 6.
What were the consequences of all that testing, especially the atmospheric ones?
Grave long-term health effects. The radioactive fallout spread globally. Estimates suggest that up to 2.4 million people worldwide could eventually die from cancers and other illnesses linked directly to the fallout from 20th century nuclear testing.
Millions, just from testing.
Just from testing. It really underscores the pervasive, lingering danger of these weapons, even when they aren't used in war.
Okay, let's pivot to the arguments. Why do countries want these weapons? The main reason is deterrence, right?
Deterrence is the cornerstone argument, yes. The idea is that possessing nuclear weapons prevents attacks, either nuclear or large-scale conventional attacks, because of the credible threat of devastating retaliation.
Mutually assured destruction, MAD, we talked about that.
Exactly. Man-I is the ultimate form of deterrence between nuclear powers. But deterrence also applies to preventing conventional attacks from stronger adversaries. For some states, nukes are seen as the ultimate insurance policy.
The great equalizer.
In a sense, the ultimate guarantor of national security and sovereignty. Like the UK wanting an independent deterrent against the much larger Soviet conventional forces during the Cold War.
And the nuclear triad, how does that fit in?
The triad, having bombers, land-based missiles, and submarine-launched missiles, strengthens deterrence by making a disarming first strike much harder. It ensures you can retaliate even if some forces are destroyed. Survivability equals credibility.
Proponents also make the historical argument, don't they, that nukes prevented World War III, the long peace.
That argument is definitely made, that the sheer destructive power made direct war between the U.S. and USSR and potentially other major powers too costly to contemplate.
And the Hiroshima-Nagasaki argument, again, that they saved lives by ending WWII faster.
Yes, that's often cited as a justification for their initial use. Our doing it avoided a bloody invasion of Japan.
Okay, so that's the pro side, largely centered on stability through fear. What about the con side, the arguments against having them?
The arguments against are powerful and start with the sheer humanitarian catastrophe they represent.
We touched on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right. Unimaginable destruction from relatively small early bombs. A single modern weapon can wipe out a major city, kill millions instantly, and cause long-term suffering from burns, injuries, radiation.
And a major exchange.
A large-scale nuclear war, say between the US and Russia, could kill hundreds of millions directly and potentially billions through the after effects. It's an existential threat.
And they're indiscriminate weapons.
Fundamentally so.
Yeah.
You cannot target only military objectives with nuclear weapons in populated areas. Civilians will inevitably be the vast majority of victims. This makes their use inherently contrary to the principles of international humanitarian law, like distinction and proportionality.
Then there are the longer-term effects, radiation.
Ionizing radiation causes sickness, cancers, genetic damage for generations. It contaminates land, water, air for decades or centuries. We saw the lasting health impact just from testing. Imagine widespread use.
And the big one, nuclear winter.
That's the potential global consequence. Even a limited regional nuclear war could throw enough soot and smoke into the upper atmosphere from burning cities to block sunlight, drastically lowering global temperatures.
Causing
Crop failures worldwide, mass starvation. Studies suggest a full U.S.-Russia exchange could trigger a decade-long nuclear winter, potentially killing upwards of 5 billion people from famine within 2 years. It's planetary-scale devastation.
So even if they're never used, just having them carries huge risks.
Absolutely. The risk of accidental nuclear war is terrifyingly real and constant.
How so?
You have roughly 2,000 weapons on high alert, launchable in minutes. In some countries, the launch decision rests with one person, possibly with only 15 minutes warning time, based on potentially flawed sensor data.
And you can't recall them once launched.
No recall, no undo button. And history is littered with near misses. Technical glitches, human error, misinterpretations.
You mentioned some earlier, the bomb drop near Kirtland, the Goldsboro incident.
Yeah, the Goldsboro B-52 crash in '61. A 20-megaton bomb, 5 out of 6 safety switches failed. It came incredibly close to detonating.
The Cuban Missile Crisis.
October '62. Probably the closest the world ever came. A Soviet subcommander, Vasily Arkhipov, refused to authorize firing a nuclear torpedo when they were under pressure from U.S. destroyers. He likely saved the world.
Able Archer 83.
A realistic NATO exercise in November '83, simulating nuclear release. Some in the Soviet military genuinely thought it might be cover for a real first strike. Tensions were incredibly high.
And the Norwegian rocket incident?
1995. A scientific rocket launch looked like a potential U.S. missile launch on Russian early warning radar. President Yeltsin actually activated the nuclear briefcase before they confirmed it was a false alarm.
These stories are chilling. It feels like we've been lucky.
Extremely lucky. It highlights the inherent dangers in the command and control systems, the potential for catastrophic mistakes.
Beyond the practical risks, there's the moral dimension.
Absolutely. Nuclear ethics forces us to confront the possibility of human extinction, mass slaughter, irreversible environmental damage. Can possessing, let alone using, such weapons ever be morally justified? Many argue the indiscriminate killing of civilians is fundamentally inhumane and illegal. It's that bottomless wound again.
And the cost. You mentioned the U.S. spending $1.7 trillion over 30 years.
Globally, nuclear-armed states spend something like $225 million a day on their nuclear forces. Think what else that money could do.
Healthcare, climate change, education.
No, exactly. It's a massive diversion of resources, and it fuels arms races as countries try to keep up or modernize.
This raises an important question. How do we even begin to reconcile the supposed security benefits with this potential for utter catastrophe and the moral weight?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But the world has tried to manage these risks through international agreements.
Okay, so despite the dangers, there's been cooperation, treaties.
Yes, a whole complex web has developed over decades. The cornerstone is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, from 1970.
What are its main parts?
It has 3 basic pillars. Non-proliferation. Non-nuclear states promise not to acquire nukes. Disarmament. The 5 recognized nuclear states commit to pursue negotiations towards nuclear disarmament. And peaceful use, guaranteeing all states access to peaceful nuclear technology.
Has it worked?
It's had successes, but it's also under stress. 191 countries have signed, which is remarkable. But you have India, Pakistan, Israel outside it, and North Korea withdrew. And progress on the disarmament pillar has been very slow, frustrating many non-nuclear states.
What other treaties are important?
The Partial Test Ban Treaty, PTBT, in '63 was huge banned atmospheric tests, drastically reducing radioactive fallout.
But not underground tests.
No, that's what the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, from '96, aims to do: ban all test explosions. But it hasn't officially entered into force yet because key countries haven't ratified it.
What about limits on the actual arsenals?
That's been mainly bilateral U.S.-Russia efforts. The SALT talks, then the START treaties, culminating in New START, which capped deployed strategic warheads. It was extended to 2026, but Russia suspended its participation in 2023, which is worrying.
And the INF Treaty?
That eliminated a whole class of intermediate-range land-based missiles in Europe back in 1987. A major achievement, but both the U.S. and Russia withdrew from it in 2019.
So some steps forward, some steps back. What about the TPNW, the ban treaty?
The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, adopted in 2017, entered into force in 2021. It makes everything related to nuclear weapons development, testing, possession, use, threat of use, illegal for the states that join it.
Who has joined?
Mostly non-nuclear weapon states. None of the nuclear-armed states or their allies have joined. But it's significant because it establishes a clear international legal norm against nuclear weapons, driven by humanitarian concerns.
And international organizations, the UN, IAEA.
Crucial roles. The UN provides a forum for disarmament diplomacy, promotes norms, supports things like nuclear weapon-free zones. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, is the watchdog. Its inspectors verify that nuclear materials aren't being diverted from peaceful programs to weapons, essential for the NPT's verification.
Looking back at those near misses, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Able Archer, what did we learn about managing crises when nuclear weapons are involved?
What's fascinating here is that even in the depths of the Cold War, communication and diplomacy, however strained, were possible and vital.
The Cuban Missile Crisis resolution.
A combination of public pressure, the blockade, back-channel deals, removing missiles from Cuba and Turkey, and crucial decisions by individuals on both sides not to escalate. It led directly to improvements like the Moscow-Washington hotline and the PTBT. Real lessons were learned.
Able Archer.
That scare seems to have genuinely affected President Reagan, pushing him towards more dialogue with the Soviets. Understanding the other side's fears became critical. General Perut's decision not to raise the NATO alert level based on intelligence was also key de-escalation.
And the 95 rocket incident.
It exposed vulnerabilities in warning systems and protocols, leading to better notification procedures for things like scientific launches. Each crisis, terrifying as it was, often spurred efforts to improve communication and reduce risks. Cooperation, even between adversaries, proved essential.
Okay, let's try to sum this all up. The good, the bad, the ugly, and the future. What's the core good argument for nuclear weapons?
The primary good cited is deterrence, preventing major power wars, maintaining a fragile kind of peace since '45. For possessing states, they're seen as that ultimate security guarantee. And don't forget, the spin-offs of the science also led to nuclear energy, medicine.
Now, the bad. What are the undeniable downsides?
The bad is their sheer existential threat. City-destroying power, millions dead, potential nuclear winter causing global famine, maybe billions dead. They are indiscriminate, violating humanitarian law. And the massive financial cost diverting resources from other critical needs.
And the ugly. The really uncomfortable truths.
The ugly includes the constant risk of accidental war, from malfunction or miscalculation. Those near misses are terrifying. The deep moral stain, that bottomless wound, the lasting health and environmental damage from testing alone, and the fact that they perpetuate mistrust and fuel arms races even today.
Which brings us to the future. What's the current landscape?
It's complex and, frankly, worrying. We're seeing renewed arms racing, modernization programs, key treaties collapsing or being suspended. Proliferation concerns remain high, especially with regional tensions.
What are the biggest challenges ahead?
Strengthening the NPT regime, finding ways to reduce the risk of accidental use, maybe de-alerting forces, adopting no first-use policies, tackling the sheer overkill in existing arsenals, figuring out how new tech like AI impacts nuclear command and control, and overcoming the deep political resistance to actual disarmament.
Are there any hopeful paths forward?
Dialogue is always crucial, even without formal treaties. Reinvigorating arms control has to be our priority. And the TPNW, the ban treaty, offers a different path. building a global norm against the weapons themselves, putting moral and political pressure on the nuclear states. It represents the aspirations of the majority of the world.
So what does this all mean? Where does that leave us?
It means the future really hinges on collective action, on prioritizing shared global security over narrow nationalistic views. Ultimately, recognizing that the only way to truly eliminate the risks associated with nuclear weapons is to eliminate the weapons themselves.
It's such a profound paradox, isn't it? These tools of ultimate destruction that might have prevented even larger conflicts, yet keep us perpetually on edge, living under this shadow.
And the margin for error, even with all the safeguards and lessons learned, remains terrifyingly thin. One mistake, one miscalculation.
It really makes you think. The nuclear question, it's not just about military strategy anymore. It's about who we are, what kind of future we want. Are we going to be stewards of this planet, or are we just gambling with extinction?